And next we'll turn to Princeton Lyman, former ambassador.
Thank you very much, Professor Teller, and thanks to the organizers of this conference. It's just a privilege to be here in a conference in honor of General Achebe, who is an inspiration and a teacher to all of us. I have a long connection to Nigeria, not only that I was an ambassador there, but I've been traveling to and from Nigeria for over 25 years and have a deep and abiding emotional attachment to the Nigerian people, their magnificence, their courage, their artistic brilliance, their irony, their sense of humor in the face of challenges, etc. And I hope you'll keep that in mind when I say some things that I think are counter to what we normally say about Nigeria. And I say that with all due respect to Eric, who is doing a magnificent job at the State Department, and to our good friend from the legislature. Because I have the feeling that we, both Nigerians and Americans, may be doing Nigeria and Nigerians no favor by stressing Nigeria's strategic importance. I know all the arguments. It's a major oil producer. It's the most populous country in Africa. It's made major contributions to Africa and peacekeeping. And of course, negatively, that if Nigeria were to fall apart, the ripple effects would be tremendous, etc. But I wonder if all this emphasis on Nigeria's importance creates a tendency to inflate Nigeria's opinion of its own invulnerability. Among much of the elite today, I have the feeling that there is a belief that Nigeria is just too big to fail, too important to be ignored, and that Nigerians can go on ignoring some of the most fundamental challenges they have, many of which have been talked about, the disgraceful lack of infrastructural development, the growing problems of unemployment, the failure to deal with the underlying problems in the Delta, the failure to consolidate democracy, and somehow feel that Nigeria will remain important to everybody because of all those reasons that it's strategically important. And I'm not sure that that's helpful. And let me sort of deconstruct those elements of Nigeria's importance and ask whether they are as relevant as they have been. We often hear that 1 in 5 Africans is in Nigeria. What does that mean? Do we ever say 1 in 5 Asians is a Chinese? Chinese power comes not just from the fact that it has a lot of people, but it's harnessed the entrepreneurial talent and economic capacity and all the other talents of China to make it a major economic force and a political force. What does it mean that 1 in 5 Africans is in Nigeria? It doesn't mean anything to a Namibian or a South Africa, etc. It's a kind of a conceit. What makes it important is what is happening to the people of Nigeria. Are their talents being tapped? Are they becoming an economic force? Is all that potential being used? And the question is, and the answer is not really. And oil. Yes, Nigeria is a major oil producer. But Brazil is now launching a 10-year program that is going to make it one of the major oil producers in the world. And every other country in Africa is now beginning to produce oil. And Angola is rivaling Nigeria in oil production. And the United States has just discovered a huge gas reserve, which is going to replace some of our dependence on imported energy. And so if you look ahead 10 years, is Nigeria really going to be that relevant as a major oil producer, or just another of the many oil producers while the world moves on to alternative sources of energy and other sources of supply? And what about its influence, its contributions to the continent? As our representative from the Parliament has talked out, there's a great history of those contributions, but that's history. Is Nigeria really playing a major role today in the crisis in Niger, on its border, or in Guinea, or in Darfur, or after many, many promises, making any contribution to Somalia? The answer is no. Nigeria is today not making the major impact on its region, or on the Africa Union, or on the big problems of Africa that it was making before. And what about its economic influence? Well, as we've talked about earlier, there is a deindustrialization going on in Nigeria. The lack of infrastructure, the lack of power means that with imported goods under globalization, Nigerian factories are closing, more and more people are becoming unemployed, and Nigeria is becoming a kind of society that imports and exports and lives off the oil, which doesn't make it a very significant economic entity. Now, of course, on the negative side, that the collapse of Nigeria would be enormous. It would be enormous, but is that a point to make Nigeria strategically important? Years ago, I worked for an Assistant Secretary of State. I had the longest tenure in that job in the 1980s. And I remember in one meeting, a minister from a country not very friendly to the United States came in and was berating the Assistant Secretary on all the evils of the United States and all its dire plots and things in Africa, and he was going on and on and on. And finally, the Assistant Secretary cut him off and said, you know, the biggest danger for your relationship with the United States is not our opposition, but that we find you irrelevant. And the point is that Nigeria can become much less relevant to the United States. We've already seen evidence of it. When President Obama went to Ghana and not Nigeria, he was sending a message that Ghana symbolized more of the significant trends, issues, and importance that one wants to put on Africa than Nigeria. And when I was asked by journalists why President Obama didn't go to Nigeria, I said, what would he gain from going? Would Nigeria be a good model for democracy? Would it be a model for good governance? Would he obtain new commitments on Darfur or Somalia or strengthening the African Union or in Niger or elsewhere? No, he would not. So he didn't go. And when Secretary Clinton did go indeed, but she also went to Angola. And who would have thought years ago that Angola would be the most stable country in the Gulf of Guinea? And established a binational commission in Angola. So the handwriting may already be on the wall. And that's a sad commentary. Because what it means is that Nigeria's strategic importance in the end, its most important strategic importance, would be that it could fail. And that's a sad, sad conclusion. It doesn't have to happen, but I think we ought to stop talking about what a great country it is and how terribly important it is to us, and talk about what it would be for Nigeria to be that important and great. And that takes an enormous amount of commitment. And you don't need saints. You don't need leaders like Nelson Mandela in every state, because you're not going to get them. I served in South Korea in the middle 1960s, and it was a time when South Korea, which was poor and considered hopeless, was beginning to turn around and would later become, my gosh, to everybody's amazement then, the 11th largest economy in the world. And I remember the economists in our mission saying, you know, it didn't bother him that the leading elites and the government of South Korea was taking 10, 15, 20% off the top of every project, as long as every project was a good one. And that was the difference. The leadership at that time was determined to solve the fundamental economic issues of South Korea and turn its economy around. That's not happening in Nigeria today. You don't need saints. You need people who say, you know, we could become irrelevant, and we've got to do something about it. Thank you very much.